know exactly how many MPs, Tory MPs, are within this sort of mafia-like sounding group of 5 families, for heaven's sake. We're trying to get to all of that throughout the evening, but if the bulk of them abstain like that, then we could be in for a bit of a shock this evening. Anything could happen. First of all, before we get into my guests and analyse all of this, I'm going to pass you to Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom.
Richard, thank you, and good evening to you. It is indeed an eventful evening in Westminster tonight. If you've been following our programmes, the Prime Minister facing the biggest test, some feel, of his premiership tonight. MPs are voting on the second reading of his Safety in Rwanda bill, Safety of Rwanda. This is a live shot of the House of Commons. If you're watching us on television today, we're waiting to see if the legislation will pass its first major hurdle. Rishi Sunak, of course, working all day to avert rebellion. We hear breakfast meetings this morning. That effort to persuade MPs that were wavering began with bacon rolls in number 10 at the first light of day. But he is, it must be said, facing considerable resistance from the right of the Conservative Party now. You may have heard just then Richard Tice talking about the 5 families of the Conservative Party who are considerably critical of this proposed bill. Well, Tory rebels have confirmed the bulk of them will abstain from tonight's vote. Let's get some analysis on that now from our political editor, Chris Hope, who joins us from Westminster and who's been watching events for us. So, Chris, if you could outline for us first, what are the 3 options here for this bill? It can pass, the government can stop the vote, or the vote can be defeated. If you can go into the detail of that.
That's right, Polly. So this bill, this Rwanda bill, is intended to make Rwanda deemed a safe country by our parliament, to overrule concerns that judges have that people who go there will not have their human rights respected. This, of course, is designed to break the model of these people trafficking gangs sending boats of migrants across the English Channel, and to making sure that if you do that, you risk going to Rwanda and being processed there and staying in Rwanda. There's all sorts of checks and balances being revealed by the government last week to make sure that judges can be assured that people who are sent there have their rights respected. Now, tonight, that vote is taking place as we speak. There are 3 votes. The second one is the one to watch. That is the key one. If this bill falls at second reading, there will be a full-blown crisis in the government. It hasn't been defeated at second reading at this stage since 1986. I do expect Labour to try and table an opportunistic motion of no confidence in the government to try and force to create the difficulties and for the government going forward, and its Rwanda plan will be in disarray. If it sneaks through by maybe low 10s, low 20s of MPs as a majority, which I do expect actually, then the MPs on the Tory right, the so-called 5 family groupings of different groupings on the Tory right, around 100 of them, they will then try and amend it when it comes back to the Commons in January. I must say, as of the statement from Mark Francois at 7:15 has thrown a spanner in the works. He has announced that the bulk of the members of the 5 families, which number 100 Tory MPs, are going to abstain. If more than 60 abstain, the bill will fall. So if you take Francois at his word, the chairman of the European Research Group and the spokesman for these 5 families, if that happens, this bill falls. And then we are in a completely risky territory for this government, facing a no-confidence vote possibly, and possibly an early election if they lose that. That's unlikely, by the way. No MP, if you're on the Tory side, wants an election when you're so far behind in the polls. But there's already a very real feeling of jeopardy, Polly, here in Parliament, coming on the 4th anniversary of the Tory party's landslide win in 2019. Quite extraordinary.
Chris, if that Tory rebellion defeats this bill for the government, and don't forget, we're hearing, of course, from Northern Ireland that the DUP were considering also voting against the government on this matter. If enough abstain, parliamentary rules dictate this same second reading of the bill can't be put through Parliament again. But if it has to pass, if the government wants it to pass, it must be voted on again in the future. When will that be?
Well, that's a big if. the rules are that if it's been defeated by a parliament, I don't think it can come back in the same form. They want to find a different way to present it. Now, the European Research Group of Tory MPs pulled out its research yesterday. They gave it a thumbs down. They said this bill is unamendable in its current form, by which it means to amend it to the position the right want it, the European Research Group of Tory MPs, to get to the place they want to be, they would change the character of it so much it would cease to be the same bill. And that's why I think there's a real question about whether it can survive even that. The problem they've got, of course, Polly, is if Mr Sunak has been telling MPs today privately that they will amend it to harden it up, if that goes ahead and they do amend it, make it almost firm it up so it ignores even more the European courts and the Human Rights Act, that will really annoy those on the One Nation caucus of the party, the left of the party, and they won't support it either. Mr Sunak is walking a very, very tight, narrow line, a tightrope, if you will, between left and right. Will he fall off? We're about to find out.
Well, we'll find out in the next 30 minutes or so. For the moment, Chris Hope in Westminster, thank you. And I'll hand you back now to Richard Tice.
Welcome back, my friends, to Farage on GB News at just after 7 o'clock. Well, I hope you're keeping up with all of that. I mean, it's all quite straightforward, isn't it? All from Christopher Hope there, the simple answers to some extraordinary questions. The House of Commons is filling up as we wait to hear the first numbers on the amendment. I'm joined in the studio by two great guests to sort of analyse and dig into this, frankly, complete chaos. It's just extraordinary what is going on. On my right, Matthew Larza, very good to see you. You are a former head of broadcasting at the Labour Party. You've been through all of this.
Absolutely.
Over many years. And I'm joined also by the immigration lawyer expert, Paul Turner. Great to see you again in the studio analysing this. You've said before you're not surprised by any of this failing. But Matthew, coming to you first, this is complete self-inflicted chaos.
Absolutely.
At any stretch of the imagination.
Absolutely. These are extraordinary scenes. Basically, who's running Britain tonight? Is Rishi Sunak Prime Minister, or is Mark Francois, who thinks he's Prime Minister? Literally, we have the Prime Minister being held hostage by, as you say, this mafia-like on one side, and then he's got the left of the Tory party on the other side, and he looks extremely isolated in the middle. And when you've got to the stage where people are asking who runs the country, who's really in charge, you've had it.
Absolutely right. So what would the Labour Party be doing? What would Keir Starmer and his French bench, I mean, apart from laughing into their tea or coffee or something stronger?
Something stronger later on, certainly, I think, after the votes.
What would they be thinking? So,
look, I think what Labour's thinking is that if they do lose tonight, it will immediately put down a motion of no confidence in the government. Now, that is likely to fail because, as Christopher said, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and we don't expect Tory MPs to vote for an early election. But it will highlight to the British people that it's time they had the say.
But that might be the obvious thing to do. But is there a smart reason, actually, for them to pause and to almost like have the threat of that no confidence vote hanging over them? Might he, for example, say, well, we need to sit over Christmas and sort of slightly rub your noses in?
Yeah, I think certainly. I mean, we are literally running up against the Christmas countdown. I think Suella Braverman said that the House should sit over Christmas. I think Labour would definitely agree that we need to sort this mess out. We can't have the government wait until January to decide what the family, as it said, think that we should do. But ultimately, this is the end of Rishi Sunak as a Prime Minister. He's a lame duck from now on, even if he survives for 6 months.
But if he just wins it,
even if he just wins,
5 to 15 votes,
because even if he wins tonight, he can't win tonight. Win or lose the actual votes, he can't win politically because he is now a lame duck because he's not running the show.
You're essentially saying it's a lose, lose, lose for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. Prime Minister in name only, possibly. Paul, I've asked you before whether you were surprised by the Supreme Court's ruling a couple of weeks back on this. Whether you were surprised that actually we had the immigration minister and lots of others with their concern. I mean, this is not only chaos; it's a legal car crash. It is carnage on the floor of the House of Commons.
It's carnage over something that is mad. It simply doesn't make any sense. I've looked at the treaty since it was published, I think, last Tuesday, and the treaty itself is a work of fiction. It describes Lilliput land. In it, we have a Rwandan system where people arrive, they're given a house, they're given food, they get a free interpreter, they get health care. On top of that, they get an appeal, they get a lawyer given to them, they get interpretation at the appeal, they get independent judges.
Yeah, but Paul, we have committed to spend £290 million. So, I mean, we'd quite like it to be quite comfortable there, given all that money that we've spent.
Well,
I mean, that's not unreasonable, is it?
That money has actually gone to the Rwandans to facilitate the scheme. Some people might use a different word.
Well, to refurbish a hotel and to build some homes and things. I mean,
No,
surely the government's confident in the competence of their partners in Rwanda to look after these people.
20 million has gone. The rest of it has probably gone somewhere else into this. But one has to remember that the Rwandans created their asylum appeal system in 2018. And from 2018 until, I think, today, they haven't managed to do a single appeal. So they have this wonderful thing on paper that looks like a fantastically fair and compassionate system. But in short, it's just not there. So
that's all very well, but actually, I've got here on my screen a UNHCR, the refugee agency, their annual results report, 29 pages for Rwanda 2022, complimenting Rwanda for how well they look after their 127,000 refugees from elsewhere in Africa. So there seems to be a lot of contradictions as to what really is the situation in Rwanda.
The key thing you've touched upon there, Richard, is refugees from Africa. Now, in Rwanda...
But surely a refugee's a refugee. I mean, they're all treated the same.
We're seeking what I wish they were. But in Rwanda, there's about a 97% rejection rate for Afghan or Syrian refugees, or Eritrean or Iranian refugees. In the UK, the acceptance rate is 97%. Now, it can't be bad luck that all the ones that go to Rwanda have made up their claim and all the ones that come here are telling the truth. So there is a disconnect, and there seems to be...
But it's about the way they're treated. And if the UNHCR is saying that actually Rwanda's doing well treating these people, then why should people in the UK expect that refugees from the who've come through the UK to Rwanda will be treated any differently?
Well, if one looks at it, it's the African refugees that UNHCR say that Rwanda is not mistreating.
But if they're not mistreating them, why would they mistreat refugees coming from the UK?
Well, the refugees coming from the UK are not UK citizens. They're going to be people... Broadly, the asylum-producing countries in the UK are Afghanistan. Now Albania's dropped off ever since the government implemented the...
But lots come from Africa, Sudan and others.
The main asylum-producing countries are Afghan, Syria, Eritrea,
So
Yemen.
you think Rwanda would treat different refugees from different countries differently?
Well, the statistics show that 97% of those people that come from the Middle East are refused, whereas they're accepted in the United Kingdom. So I don't know why they perhaps don't like them or for whatever reason, but looking into it, there seems to be a cultural issue, so the various reports say, where the Rwandans just don't accept people from the Middle East, and so they reject them. And they're the ones that probably get bussed over the...
OK, let's go back to Matthew. If the Conservative government loses this tonight, what do you think their best option is? Is it to do they withdraw it and try and resubmit something, or do they frankly... They're better actually just scrapping it and just letting the clock tick down to the election?
I think that might be the most sensible option, but I don't think it's the one they're going to take. I think this isn't the end if they lose tonight, because Rishi Sunak has staked so much political capital.
He has.
When it's 3 words on the lectern, you know that you can't, there's no rowing back, however much circumstances might dictate. You've basically made a road for your own back, and you're going to have to live with the consequences.
So he's got to do something.
He'll have to, I mean, he'll have to go into secret conclave with the family, these groups of 5 groups of sort of right-wing Tory MPs, to try and find something that they will find acceptable. I mean, let's just look at it. We heard Mark Francois...
But we know they've told us if they move literally an inch further to the right on this, then the Rwandan government may say we're against the law. I mean, so have they not been telling us the truth? Sure.
No, I think what you might find is that whatever is agreed that keeps the family happy doesn't keep the Rwandan government happy. But then at least that gives the Rishi's only possible excuse, which is Rwanda now says no, which is at least it's out of his hands then. We're out of Westminster's hands.
With a few minutes to go, Matthew, do you think this passes or not?
I think it's on a knife edge with extension.
No.
I think yes, just.
Paul, does it pass? Yes or no?
Yes.
There we are, folks. You've heard it here from my 2 experts. Both think it'll... I think you're a just. That was a sort of a hesitant yes. We've got 2 yeses. I think it'll just pass, but anything could happen. All 3 of us could be wrong. Don't go anywhere. We'll come straight back to you. It's GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back, my friends, to GB News. Yes, it's Farage. I'm Richard Tice, and this is an extraordinary evening. We've just had the Labour amendment has been rejected by the MPs in the House of Commons. Interestingly, there were 608 votes were cast in that first amendment. So you can see that the vast, vast bulk of the 650 MPs are in the House of Commons. There may be a few more that abstained in that first amendment. So fascinating what happens now as we prepare for the crucial, the absolute crux vote there. My previous 2 guests before the break, Matthew and Paul, they both think that it will just pass. I think it'll just pass as well. I think there's a lot of politicking, but we could all be wrong. It's very, very close indeed. And I'm delighted now to be joined for his first outing on GB News in the studio, Dr. Omar Hamoud Galega, who you are currently a Fellow of Political Science and Public Policy at the London School of Economics. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you.
So, through this process, I mean, there's all the sort of the technical shenanigans in the House of Commons, and actually, I think to most people at home, this is almost like it's chaotic, it's mad. What does it all mean? If we just take a step back for a second, what are we really talking about here? We've got a significant amount of illegal immigration coming into the United Kingdom, and everybody knows that that's got to stop. The Prime Minister has set his stall on stopping the boats, which is the bulk of illegal immigration, and he said this will stop the boats. But actually, we've had 2 previous bills that they said would stop illegal immigration, and essentially this chaos indicates a lot of people don't think it will. Where do we go from here? I mean, the United Kingdom is in a pretty bad place in terms of trying to stop that basic objective.
Yes. So, first of all, thanks for having me. I think the first takeaway is, even if this bill passes Parliament, it's not going to work. And it's not going to work for, let's say, mainly 2 reasons. First, because even if we manage to send people to Rwanda, as the government is claiming it would be able to do. It would be just very few. What does this mean? It means that probably many people, even if this happens, many people will actually not have the information about this happening. So let me rephrase this. Many migrants actually don't get the information from where you think they get the information from. So often what happens is that they get their information from the illegal smuggling groups, from Facebook groups, from Instagram, and so many of them will not know about the Rwanda plan.
So they won't even know about the Rwanda plan as a deterrent.
Yes.
And they won't know that it's only a few hundred if they did know.
Exactly. And even if they knew, we have to assume that they will care about it enough to do something about it. And I think this is the big mistake, because often people will have many reasons to be willing to come to the UK. It's a place where they might have a network, they might speak the language, they might think of it as a beacon of the rule of law, a place where they can be safe. And so even if there is a risk, tiny risk, they might be sent back to Rwanda, actually they might not care about it and they will try their best.
And this is the thing, with your expertise, because you've worked at the United Nations and you study international migration and refugee policy, so you see this around the world. How chaotic, on a sort of scale of 1 to 10, is this in the United Kingdom relative to what you might be seeing in let's say, France or Germany or the United States? Just to help people at home understand, are we the only ones this incompetent and chaotic?
Well, actually, the numbers in the United Kingdom are actually smaller than in other European countries. So if you want, it's not so bad here, but it has become worse, especially since 2020. And why is this? It is because since 2020, we have left the Dublin regulation, which actually allowed us to send people back to their first country.
But the numbers were tiny. They were hundreds.
Exactly.
In fact,
so
more were being sent this way. So I'm not really sure that's relevant. But
no, it is indeed. Because effectively, nowadays you can think, oh, well, if you'd make an agreement with France or with many other European countries, we might be able to send them back and stop these smuggling gangs. But we will not be able to, because we have a really bad relationship with our European neighbours.
Interesting. So you're putting on Brexit, which that's something I actually don't accept. But nevertheless, I mean, there are massive problems across Germany.
Yes.
We've got the whole Schengen agreement, which is under threat as well. Stay with us, Omar, because anything could go on. I'm going to hand back to Polly in a few minutes. But Omar, we're still just looking at this. We'll keep going on this issue of Schengen, because Schengen is the sort of the free movement across most of the European Union nations. But some countries now are really worried about that, the impact of free movement, of illegal migration through those countries. They may have come across the Mediterranean to Italy and then spreading out, and some obviously arriving. Do you see that actually Schengen itself may fail as part of this international illegal migration crisis?
It's a very good question. I hope it will not, but it might. Because, of course, over the last few years, countries have actually raised temporary barriers to stop migratory flows. For instance, France has done this with Italy, because Italy did let many people through. But this is not so much the main point. The main point is, how do we actually take this problem and solve it? And my personal opinion on this is that the Rwanda plan is just a policy of mass destruction. Because the government knows, the Home Office knows,
it won't work. Mass destruction of the government.
Absolutely. No. It's from its other failures. And, Rishi Sunak, I mean, this was Suella Braverman's policy. And Rishi Sunak now is trying to bring it forward, even if everyone knows, all experts know, that it's not going to work, even if it passes through the Commons.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Now, actually, of course, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has just entered the Commons. He's literally staked his reputation on this, although, of course, it's not actually his policy. The Rwanda policy, which has now been talked about for, I think, 1 year and 3 quarters, was originally announced by the then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. He actually, when he announced it, he said it will be subject to huge legal challenges.
Yes.
So he knew, and yet they've careered down this course of self-destruction. Were you surprised, if you look back, Omar, at that moment then, you're probably surprised then, are you surprised this has ended up in the chaos now?
No, absolutely.
You're not?
No, definitely not. And I don't think any legal scholar, any UN official who works on human rights is surprised by this. This was never supposed to work. There is a very good reason why no other country on the planet has a policy like this. And especially with a country like Rwanda, which often the Conservative government forgets, is a dictatorship, which has been run by, since the year 2000 by Paul Kagame.
Yes, that's right. But I was just talking to Paul Turner, previous guest, because I've got on my screen here a 2022 report from the UNHCR, Refugee Agency, their sort of annual results report, which is, it's 29 pages, and I've been through it. It talks about how well they treat 127,000 refugees, and actually, it's not saying it's perfect, but it's saying they're making good progress with some of the key objectives regarding housing and education and employment. And many would read that and say, well, actually, what's the problem?
Let me challenge that. If you go and check Human Rights Watch, so a reputable source when it comes to human rights
violations. But this is your own
violations.
United Nations that you used to work for.
Absolutely.
You must trust their work.
Let me get there. It is true that refugees are treated well in Rwanda, and there are many political reasons because of that. But if you look at human rights violations overall, it's actually a country that still tortures and imprisons many of its political opponents. If you look at the last electoral results in Rwanda, 2017, the presidential elections were won by Paul Kagame again, with more than 98% of the votes. So it would be as if we are putting our hands and trusting UK migration policy into a country that is not, less reliable than or more reliable than Maduro's Venezuela.
Yeah, I think we can take it as read, being polite about it, that if you get 98% of the votes, that's probably not a genuine, open-spirited democracy. I think we probably reasonably say that in the traditional sense of the word. But on the other side, they've got strong economic growth, things work there, and they want more people to come and fill their jobs and things and to keep that growth going. I mean, some would say, well, is it a benign dictatorship that's actually achieving results for citizens and people coming there?
Well, dictatorship achieve good results until they don't, because you can never know what they will do next, because they're not bound by the rule of law, which is what distinguishes a country like the United Kingdom from a dictatorship like Rwanda's.
Yes, so exactly. You've got that difference there. And, of course, what we're seeing now is the sort of the chaos of democracy, where we, in a sense, we don't know what's going. We've got so much debate and sort of division, but division with votes as opposed to, in a sense, dissent with dictatorship. I guess that's the key difference we're talking about. I think any minute we are going to get the result of this critical vote, hopefully. Yeah, I'm going to throw now to Polly Middlehurst to give us this result of the second vote.
Indeed, all eyes on Westminster tonight, Richard, as MPs vote on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's crucial Rwanda plan on asylum seekers. Let's hear the vote.
The noes to the left, 269.
They're cheering a majority of 80.
The ayes to the right, 313. The noes to the left, 269. So the ayes have it, unlocked. We now come to the programme motion to be moved formally. The question is, as on the order paper, as many of us are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. The contrary, no.
So there we have it in the House of Commons. The ayes have it, 313 to 269. Let's take you to Westminster for analysis of that historic vote in the House of Commons just now. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, is standing by. Chris?
So majority there, 44, I make it for the government, Polly. A majority of 44 for the government. And that is not as bad as it had appeared, but we have now got an idea what the route forward is for the government. They will look at trying hardening this legislation, making it stronger, making it firmer to try and attract more right-wingers not to oppose it at the next stage. This battle goes on for the Tory government. You heard the strength of the feeling there from Mark Francois, the so-called five families of the Tory right, many as 100 members. It looks like many of them have sat on their hands. We'll work out how many abstentions there were shortly and bring that to GB News viewers. It could be as many as, looking at that, 80 possibly abstentions on the Tory side, 70 or 80. Certainly enough to overturn a majority if they turn their fire on the government. You heard Mark Francois in that statement about an hour, 45 minutes ago, in which he then made very clear, if the government doesn't move to harden up this legislation, the right will vote against this bill at the third reading. So we are facing a difficult Christmas, a Christmas for the PM, where he's got to bring around and work out how he can make this more palatable to the right of the party to stop the votes once and for all and avoid losing the Nation caucus, the 100 or so Tory MPs on the left who have said they would support this bill so far. They are warning him, don't go any further in ignoring human rights laws. We can't support that. The PM has done it. He's got past the first hurdle. It's been bruising. What happens next now is absolutely vital for him, Polly.
Chris, just for our viewers who are tuning in to hear this culmination, if you like, of our coverage over the last hour or so, to be clear, the government has now won that Rwanda vote. It's winning its flagship policy bill.
Correct.
Despite a number of abstentions. You said you still haven't done the maths yet. 313 in favour, voting for the second reading of this bill, 269 against, and your maths correct, 44, we believe, abstaining from that vote. So this, of course, Chris, all against the background of a looming general election. Eventually, we haven't heard when that will be. What does this mean for Rishi Sunak's reputation now?
Yes, just to be clear, that's a majority of 44 for the government. The abstention figure is bigger than that. Well, it certainly weakens, I think, the government. His authority has been tested. The majority has held up more than I thought. Thought it could be down to 20s or 10s. That would have put the government on virtual life support. This is certainly a lot better than many thought. It shows, I think, the right have chosen to give a warning to the PM, Mr Sunak. He's got to act, listen to them, take it forward, deliver on that promise of hardening areas of the bill. We heard that from Richard Holden on GB News at midday. That's being said very clearly by the PM in private meetings today, I understand, with right-wing Tory MPs from the so-called five families grouping of 5 different groups on the Tory right. He's got to do more. And all the goal, essentially, is to try and make these flights take off with people arriving here illegally on small boats, take them to Rwanda, process them there. The idea is that will break the back of the business model used by these people smugglers. The hope is that they can get this through. 44 is something to work with. It's nowhere near as disastrous as it had looked when we heard earlier from Mark Francois, 6:45. He said then that the bulk of the 5 family members of the Tory right would vote against. That's around 100 Tory MPs. Now, that hasn't happened, but we do know, the bulk would not support it. That's abstentions. Well, it does look like there could be 60 or 70 abstentions, so you've proved to be correct on that. But how does the PM win those round and stop those abstentions becoming votes against? That's his challenge now going forward, Polly.
Of hope for the moment. Thanks very much indeed. The government has won its Rwanda vote. Just to recap for you, that's 313 to 269, a majority of 44. What those numbers mean will come up in our analysis next with Richard Tice.
Polly, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's fascinating because I've just done some maths whilst Christopher was talking there. In the First Amendment, the Labour amendment that was lost, 608 MPs voted. Whereas in this vote, 582 voted, which by my maths means that 26 people who voted in the first vote abstained in the second vote. And I would hesitate a reasonable guess, that those were Conservative MPs. Delighted still to be joined in the studio on my left by Dr Omar Hamoud Gallego. I'll come back to you in a second. And also Matthew Laza. Matthew, you've got a lot of experience in the politics around this. If my maths are about right, and there's about an extra 26 abstentions, we don't know exactly how many MPs are in the House of Commons, what does that tell you? I mean, when we sort of had a quick guess beforehand, we all three said it would get through, but you didn't expect it to be quite by 44, did you?
No, I thought it would be more kind of 25, 30. So, I mean, he's managed to win a few rounds, but in a sense, for Labour, this is the best possible result, because it ain't over yet. Because remember that we saw Mark Francois speaking on behalf of the 100 or so people who are part of the 5 families, these 5 tribes of the Tory party on the right, who have said that they're giving him a stay of execution. They would only abstain today, and that they would potentially still vote against.
Or is it the perfect result, actually, for the Prime Minister, in that he's got his various groups, they've all had their say, they've all sort of done their grandstanding, but at the end of the day, he's got the numbers, he can feel strong about that, and he can say to Labour, I've got the votes, this is what, on behalf of the country, this is what needs to happen.
Well, he's still got several parliamentary hurdles to get through. So if this was the end of the process, Rishi may be able to go home. But it's
I wouldn't even have the champagne quite strong to the House of Lords, isn't it?
But the issue with the House of Lords on this is that there's such feeling from the crossbenchers, in particular, from all those former lawyers, the bishops and the former bishops, that even if it wasn't for the Labour Party, you'd have trouble in the House of Lords, whatever the Commons say on an issue like this. So it really is still going to be a tough battle for Rishi to get anybody on a plane before the general election, which is his focus. It's not about winning parliamentary votes, because the public, ultimately, the political aficionados are interested in that.
I suspect he's just looking literally day by day, week by week, but actually he is going to get some sleep tonight.
He'll get some sleep tonight, but I'm not sure how much sleep he's going to get over Christmas, because it's all going to come back in the new year.
Don't go anywhere, Matthew. Thank you very much. Omar, that's reasonably comprehensive, 44. I think the Prime Minister can legitimately say this is the will of the House, it's the will of the people through their elected representatives. How do you think the wise folk in the House of Lords, I say optimistically, will respond to that? I mean, it's a fair signal when it goes to the House of Lords, or do you think they might have a very, very different view, as Matthew does?
Probably the House of Lords will counteract much of that. The House of Lords cares about human rights, it cares about the rule of law. We
all care about human rights and the rule of law.
Well, if I may, the chairman of the Conservative parties did seem to suggest a few weeks ago that the rule of law it's actually something that we, in this particular circumstance, could actually get rid of.
But this is all about the House of Commons determining what the new laws should be, and we're entitled to change our own laws.
Absolutely, but as I said earlier, even if this passes, it has passed the House, even if it passes the Lords, and we'll see how that goes, it will then be challenged by the courts. And again, I said, even if it goes through the courts, it will be challenged by the European Court of Human Rights, and even if it goes through that, it's not going to work. So all of this just to say this is a massive distraction and it's not going to bring us anywhere.
I guess in summary, everybody, with all this noise and all this confusion and grandstanding, I think all my guests, not a single one of you, think that anybody's going to be sent to Rwanda anytime soon. Do you think any before the general election?
Oh, definitely not.
Definitely not there from Omar. Matthew?
Absolutely not. Maybe a few more Home Secretaries. Maybe a few more Home Secretaries.
A few more Home Secretaries?
Yes, might visit Rwanda, but I don't think an asylum seeker is going to be sent. And in the meantime, the cases pile up and the things that should be done to stop the boats are not happening.
So, folks, there we have it. The government has won that vote. And as Matthew has just reminded me, we have sent 3 Home Secretaries to Rwanda with almost £300 million. It's almost 100 million per Home Secretary. I mean, that in itself feels like a what the Farage. But I have got a couple of others. Amongst all this chaos and madness, we need a little bit of levity, a little bit of humour. Here we go. So, in Wales, where they've introduced this 20-mile-an-hour limit across much of Wales, here's the thing. 466,000 Welsh adults have signed the petition to get rid of this mile an hour. That's more people than voted Labour at the last Assembly elections. It's 24% of all adults in Wales. Quite extraordinary. I think that's the biggest ever petition. Here's the other one. We're going to move, talking in a moment about what's going on down in Dubai with the COP28. I just thought you'd be interested in this. Al Gore, who obviously, he was a vice president, presidential candidate. He's very, very strong on the need to stop climate change and to reduce emissions. Quite keen on flying private jets, it seems. He does have a 10,000 square foot home in Tennessee that apparently guzzles more electricity in 1 year than the average American family uses in 21 years. His swimming pool would power 6 homes for a year. There we go. John Kerry, I think we may have a picture of John Kerry, just to remind us all, that doesn't look like a passenger jet to me. No, it's a private jet. John Kerry said it was a persistent lie that he had a private jet. And it turned out his family, his wife owned the jet. His family sold their jet. But anyway, he says he defended attendees at the recent Davos summit using private jets, claiming they offset their emissions and are working hard to save the planet. Well, my next guest, I'm delighted to be joined down the line, is Bob Ward, who is works at he's the Policy and Communications Director at the LSE, the Grantham Institute. Bob, a very good evening. I think you are down in Dubai, aren't you? And I know you are working very hard to reduce emissions. Is it true, Bob, that you're one of some 70,000 delegates down at COP28?
Well, I think the rumours are there are 70,000 people here associated with the COP, but a lot of those are people like businesses who are talking to each other about the opportunities that they have associated with the transition to a cleaner economy. So it's good for business to be able to do that. And there are all the negotiating teams here for 197 countries. That's why you can't do it by Zoom, Richard. People have to meet in person if you have 197 countries. It seems that Graham Stewart, who should have been leading the UK delegation, decided he had to go back for the vote in the House of Commons. So the UK...
I suppose we have to laugh at the irony of that, don't we? I mean, Graham Stewart, the UK climate minister, creating a whole load more emissions and footprint, rushing back for a vote that they won by 44 anybody. I think he's coming back in the next couple of days.
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest irony is if you're worried about refugee numbers coming to the UK, you can be rest assured that climate change is going to drive even bigger numbers of refugees over the coming years. And the government's too busy dealing with the consequences of that to worry about tackling the underlying driving causes of it. But Bob, that's the biggest irony of all.
In all seriousness, Bob, I mean, these COP summits, they go on now every year. This, I think, is the 28th. We had the one in Glasgow, which was 2 years ago, which was sort of, I think the Prime Minister then described it as a couple of minutes to midnight. What do all these delegates do for the week or 10 days of the summit? As you say, there's 196 countries. Why do you need 70,000? I'm trying to do the maths quickly in my head. I mean, it's quite a lot of delegates per country, Bob.
Yeah, well, not everybody has a large delegation. Of course, developing countries have small delegations, but there are lots of technical issues that have to be discussed. So they talk about, for instance, efforts to cut greenhouse gas emissions. They talk about the finance required. They talk about the need to adapt to the impact of climate change. They talk about the loss and damage caused by those impacts of climate change that we cannot now avoid it. And what they have to do is negotiate a text. So the COPs are consensus processes between 197 countries. Finding language that everybody agrees to is difficult and challenging. And at the moment, the conference was supposed to end at 11 a.m. this morning, local time. They are still negotiating now, and it'll probably go on for another couple of days because they are deadlocked on key issues, particularly around the issue of the future use of fossil fuels.
There is a certain irony that lots of people have commented on here in the UK, Bob, that you've got essentially a climate summit in the heart of the main sort of petro-state region, almost of the world, I think, possibly with the exception of the US, where actually, in a sense, the big row is whether or not to try and aim to eradicate all fossil fuels or to reduce their use. I mean, it's a pretty fundamental difference, but without fossil fuels, Bob, we're all heading to the caves with candles.
Well, if you tried to stop using fossil fuels overnight, indeed you would. But remember, at the moment, people are dealing with high petrol and diesel prices in the UK. It's keeping inflation higher. That's because the supply of oil is controlled by OPEC, which is a cartel of countries, including the United Arab Emirates, that cut production in order to boost oil prices. So the world is not better off by being dependent on fossil fuels. It would be much better if we were on cheaper forms of clean British energy like wind and solar. And indeed, that's true of most countries because the majority of countries are consumers of fossil fuels and not producers, have to import them and are very much exposed, as we are, to volatile prices.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, that's all the reason why we should be using our own fossil fuels, our own oil and gas in the North Sea and our own shale gas.
Where is the oil? Good. We have.
Yeah, but
the oil?
Bob, the cheapest. Well, we've got shale gas, which is potentially a great source of energy treasure.
Power your car with. You can't power your car with gas.
No, we can't, but we can create cheap electricity like they enjoy in the United States.
You have an electric car anyway, so I don't know why you're arguing about this.
No, because Bob, I've made a personal choice. But in all seriousness, the United States has much cheaper gas and electricity because they're using their own. They've got their own energy treasure. They're using it. Until other technologies come along, we don't know how long that'll be. Surely we should be using our own energy treasure rather than relying on importing fossil fuels from elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, so you can make that argument, but we already know, Richard, that if you want to frack in people's back gardens, the majority of people don't want that in the UK. So it's either a question of either you're a Democrat and you accept the will of the people and people don't want fracking around them.
Well, the truth is, Bob, the truth is they haven't actually been asked. Westminster's made that rather grand assumption in the same way it assumed people didn't want Brexit, and the people told Westminster what they actually did want.
Now, what the situation is, the moratorium that's currently in place on fracking is because the latest examination by the British Geological Survey found that they couldn't guarantee that you could frack without potentially causing damage to nearby properties.
That's a big debate we will continue, Bob. When you back from this great extravaganza that you've been enjoying in Dubai?
Well, it's a UN negotiation, Richard. It's not really a fun activity. I will be coming back tomorrow. I expect that it will probably run into tomorrow, maybe Thursday. And what they're deciding here will be very important to all of your viewers because climate change is a threat to everybody.
I'll ask them, Bob. That's for sure. Thank you very much indeed, Bob. Safe travels. That's Bob Ward. He's at the COP28 summit in Dubai with about 70,000 others. Don't go anywhere, folks, because after the break, I'm going to be talking to Enver Solomon, who is the Chief Executive of the Refugee Council, to hear his latest thoughts on the Rwanda debate. Don't go anywhere. It's GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
I
CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage on GB News. Well, it's been an action-packed, full-on evening. The government has won its crucial vote on the Rwanda bill by 44 votes. The Prime Minister, I think, will sleep much better than perhaps he feared earlier in the day this evening. But still, of course, that is not the end of it. It's got to get through the House of Lords, and there's still the risk of claims. I'm still joined in the studio by Paul Turner, immigration lawyer. Paul, can we just talk about how may individual asylum seekers try to essentially continue these claims despite this bill, just quickly?
I think what the new treaty allows people to make claims that are based on their individual circumstances. So they can't say Rwanda's not safe per se, but they will be able to say, because of my potential mental health problems, because of the trauma that I've suffered, because of my special needs, that I cannot go to Rwanda because it's just not good enough.
So my viewers will say, well, that's obvious. That's what people have been doing to date.
Well, that's right. And the Home Office have actually published details that say that if someone is minded to resist this, they can resist it for between 239 days and 420 days before they are actually removed.
Paul, thank you so much for your thoughts there as a legal expert. Another expert in matters refugee-related is my final guest of the show, Enver Solomon, Chief Executive of the Refugee Council. Enver, thank you so much for joining us. You've heard the votes this evening. Huge amounts of noise and distraction and all of this. What does it actually mean, Enver, to my viewers and listeners and the state of the illegal immigration crisis in the United Kingdom?
Well, what it means, Richard, is refugees from countries such as Afghanistan, and we know what's going on in Afghanistan, refugees from those countries will not be given a fair hearing in the UK. They'll be forcibly shipped to Rwanda. And as a nation, we've always given refugees a fair hearing when they've come here, having taken dangerous journeys. And many refugees from Afghanistan who've had to take those dangerous journeys have gone on to settle in the UK, to rebuild their lives, to contribute as law-abiding citizens, playing by the rules. But Rwanda means they won't be allowed to do that.
So, Enver, you by that answer, you assume that this will actually pass quite quickly and become effective and people will go to Rwanda?
Well, my assumption, listening to the Prime Minister, is that he wants it to happen and he's going to do everything that he can possibly do to make it happen. I'm sure there will be other legal challenges, but I think that's the government's desire, and the government will try and make it happen, will try its damnedest, in its words, to get flights off the ground to Rwanda. It won't work, of course, and it won't stop people coming, and it is, in effect, pushing refugees away from this country who have contributed to this country over many decades.
Actually, I think almost the greatest consensus is what you've just observed, which is that it won't act as a deterrent, which is the Prime Minister's sort of key objective.
Well, that's right. And I think it was particularly telling yesterday, Richard, when the Permanent Secretary, the most senior official in the Home Office, appeared before MPs in Parliament, and he was asked, will it act as a deterrent? And his answer was pretty clear. He said there's no evidence that it will, and we can't say that. So that really is pretty damning, I think, when the top official in charge of delivering this policy for the Prime Minister says to MPs that it won't act as a deterrent. I think that speaks volumes.
It really does, Enver. I mean, it's just extraordinary. We've sent them nearly 300 million quid, and no one, frankly, apart from the Prime Minister, believes, and maybe that James Cleverly thinks it's going to work.
Well, I think the policy is actually unworkable. I think officials in the Home Office know that. I think it won't act as a deterrent. I think it will fail. And I think this government, if it's serious about stopping the boats, and look, I don't want people to be taking dangerous journeys.
No.
I don't want people to be dying in the Channel. But to do that,
Enver,
we need a different approach.
Fantastic, Enver. Thank you very much. We're in agreement. None of us think this is going to work. It's not going to act as a deterrent. Coming up, folks, it's Jacob Rees-Mogg, but first, the all-important weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Drier and clearer weather will move into northwestern areas, bringing a frosty start to Wednesday for some of us, but it's going to stay drizzly and quite dull across eastern areas. That's as this area of low pressure that's brought an unsettled day today pushes into the east, where it will linger through much of the day. That will mean that we've got continued heavy rain across eastern areas through the course of this evening. There's still a rain warning in force for that across parts of northeastern England and eastern Scotland. Ahead of that rain, though, across the southeast, we'll see quite a lot of cloud develop overnight, so quite a murky night here. A different story, though, further north and west, where we'll see clear spells, allowing a frost and potentially some icy patches by tomorrow morning. And then that clearer, drier weather becomes slightly more widespread through the course of Wednesday, spreading into parts of northern England, as well as Wales and the southwest of England as well. Further east, though, it stays cloudy with drizzly rain through much of the day, so quite a dull and damp day, with drizzly rain developing in the southeast by the end of the day and feeling fairly cool as well. In the northwest, though, it will feel fairly pleasant in sunshine despite the colder start to the day. A chilly start in the southeast on Thursday morning, but it will soon cloud over as the next area of rain arrives. However, the heaviest rain will be much more limited, as that is because high pressure is starting to build in for Friday and into the weekend as well. So that means we'll see more in the way of dry weather, and temperatures will rise by day and by night. See you later.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.